be prepared for a very dull half hour now as we look forward to these memories. And first, I want to call on the good pastors. They will be followed by the Lees, the Waltzes, and the Batelands, and the Reedies, and they will just come right ahead on, one right after the other, so we won't have to introduce them. So Tim and Sally is going to take off. Before they do, I have a bucket that we want to pass around and to help defray the expenses on our meal, okay?
Hey, what's with a bucket?
I know it's probably hard to believe that Sally and I met at an emergency room. We have no skit or anything like that. I think what I'm going to say may be possibly humorous enough. She warned me back at the table that I'd better watch what I say, because tomorrow when I want a sandwich or when I want something to drink or anything like that, that I better have had a good story. So I immediately thought quickly and went to plan B. So seriously, Sally and I met, and I wish especially now I could say that, you know, I prayed and the Lord dropped this woman right in my arms, and she was sent from heaven. But it was only until a couple years ago that I even realized that. So I wish I could say that, but I know now that I do have the right one, and I praise God for that. But the way we met, I was playing softball. Used to play a lot of softball. Used to do a lot of things. But I was playing ball, and we were playing over at a little place called P&D over at Hayden. And I was playing shortstop, and I can remember looking over, and on about the second row on the left-hand side, there sat Sally. But I didn't know who Sally was. But I looked, and I thought, wow, that is a pretty girl. I'd like to go out with her. And but the game ended, and, you know, maybe even a month or so passed, and I'd not really seen her, well, back 6 or 8 months. And I walked into a jewelry store, and guess I might as well say I went in this jewelry store to buy a watch for another girl, and there Sally worked, and I thought, now I know at least where she works. So you know, since I worked at United Parcel Service, I thought carefully, and I asked the driver, I said, Earl Asher, I said, you've got to tell me what this girl's name is. Find out for me, please. So, of course, Earl, he did more than that. He really made the way before me, before I was even there. But I found out Sally's name. Well, several months still passed, and the next spring, it was right around Memorial Day, we went to I was playing softball here in Seymour, and I went over to Geisler Park just to watch, because there was an exhibition game going on between some big softball teams. So I went over to watch, and there I was dirty, and I'd slid and played a couple ball games, and I walk in, and there was Sally sitting with some of her friends. Well, a couple of her younger friends, and I should back up here, Earl Asher did more than pave the way. He had presented my name and told Sally that I was wanting to go out with her and all this. So when I walked up, I mean, there was, I really didn't notice Sally sitting there first, but I heard these snickers in the background, you know, and I turned around and I looked, and I thought, you know, who are they laughing at? And they were chuckling at me. And then I looked, and there was Sally sitting there, and Sally was about to turn beet red. I mean, I knew then what had gone on. And but at any rate, you know, I want to be cool, and, you know, I'm not going to put up this giggle stuff. So I walked on. Went with Gary Oates, a good friend of mine. Went with Gary to the 500, and we come home that evening, and we were really tired, and we'd gotten back to Seymour there, and I went over to Gary's house for a little bit, and then I decided to head on back to North Vernon, which is where I'm from. And so I started driving down Tipton Street, and I get about to the Pizza Hut, and I thought, man, I know her name. I need to look this girl's, try to find her phone number, call her, and ask her out. So I walk into the Pizza Hut, and who's working at the Pizza Hut, except for a friend of mine who worked at a radio station with me years ago. And Jimmy and Mary will know this name. It's Warren Matook. And I walked in there and I looked and I thought, all right. I said, hey, Warren, I said, you got a phone book. And you know, you'll find this hard to believe. Usually I'm the quiet one in the family, and Sally's a little noisier than I am. But on this day, I was real loud. I said, Warren, I said, there's this girl. I've got to call her and ask her out. I said, her name's Sally Green. And I'm flipping open the phone book, and I look, and Green is spelled about 26 different ways, and about 35 greens in there. And I told Warren, I said, and of course, you know, I'm quiet as always. I said, wow, this is great, Warren. All these greens in there, how in the world am I going to figure out which one it is? So I told him, I said, well, I'll just pick one out. I'll go out, I'll make a phone call, and I'll just ask if they know it's Sally Green. So I do an about face, give Warren the phone book, thank you, take off, turn around and walk out the door. And I don't know if you've been to our Pizza Hut, but you know, it's a pretty narrow aisleway that you walk in and out of right there. And now they've got got some partitions up and stuff, and a couple video games there. But when I went through there was nothing there except the back of another booth. And I turned around and I walked, and I head towards the door, and all at once I looked, and there's Sally sitting there. I didn't bat an eye. I walked straight out that door. I got in my car. I whipped out on Tipton Street, hung a right, didn't know where I was going, went about 2 blocks, and I thought, man, this is stupid. She saw me, she heard me, and she has to know that I'm going for the phone booth to call Sally Green, who's sitting right there at Pizza Hut. So I made a U-turn, I went back, and I walked in the door, and of course, she and her friend were having a real big time with this. They thought this was really a lot of fun. And I walked in and I said, my name's Tim Goodpasture, and I just said, would you like to go out with me? Because I knew, by that point, I've already made a fool of myself. You know, I might as well at least ask her, and the worst she can do is shoot me down, and I can head back to North Furnace. And fortunately, she said yes. And we didn't date real long. We were both real sure real soon now, there may be a different story here now, but at that time, she and I both were real sure. And her parents were on the verge of getting ready to move to Tucson, Arizona. Her father had retired and moved out there. And so with a lot of our college friends coming home at Christmas time, we decided that December 26th, and I do have the date right, that we would get married. And so I just, you know, the Lord really honors, and I've told this to Billy several times at the office, the Lord really honors dumb effort. And I'll guarantee you, he's honored mine. He's really blessed me. So, although we had no skit, you know, believe me, Sally had a pretty good laugh that night and what was our first date. So, that's all we had. And I don't want to let her speak, so we're going.
Gay and I would like to sing a very romantic love song for you. We'd like to, but we can't sing, so we won't. Now, we were asked to reenact our engagement. Neither of us can remember that either, so we made one out. This is the way it might have gone. Just pretend that we're college students and have very serious matters on our mind, and this is the way it might have gone. Gay, we've been going together for quite some time, and we've done a lot of things together, and I love you very much, and I'd like to marry you.
I think I'm going to have to talk to my mother.
And I want to be near you all the time. When we're apart, it's such agony in my heart, and I can't hardly stand it.
Well, I know I'm fun to be with, but how are we going to live? Yeah, I didn't finish school yet.
We'll live on love. Two can live as cheaply as one. And you can quit school and get a job.
My father's going to love that suggestion.
But honey, I love you. I really love you.
I love you too, but you don't even have a car.
And just think, someday we'll have children too.
What, in ruinous bod? No way, Jose. He wrote this.
She doesn't always tell all she knows. So we can move into married student housing and we can make a little love nest of our own right there.
Oh boy, one of those one-room efficient suites with a red vinyl hide-a-bed and cockroaches wall to wall.
Well, what do you say? Will you marry me?
Well, okay. You seem to be the least objectionable guy so far.
Build me up.
Well, Daddy hasn't even given you one of his pet nicknames yet.
Thank goodness for that. Well, like I said, that's the way it might have gone. Actually, it didn't go exactly that way. I turned her down the first 3 times she asked me. But I would like to confess here in front of all of you that I do have a wonderful wife, not just because she's here and not just because it's time to say so, but I tell her the same thing. So we have been blessed with a genuine love, and our Christian love is growing every day, and we're just thankful to have Christian friends such as you all here at this church. You've made us feel very comfortable, very at home, and we just love and appreciate every one of you, and thank you very much.
Hello? Mary Jo? Hey, wait till you hear what I've got to tell you. You know those 4 boys from Madison? The one I told you I met 3 years ago at Franklin College? They called and wanted to have a date. And all 4 of them are going to come up next Monday night, January the 7th. Yeah? Can you think that you can go? Oh, please go, because I think we'll really have a time. And you know what? All the girls and boys at North Vernon High School will be so jealous of us. We've got these 4 guys coming up, and are they sharp-looking guys? Okay? Okay, we'll be ready. January the 7th. Mary Jo? I don't know where they are. Well, they told me they'd be here at 7:30, and it's 8 o'clock, and they're not here. What are we going to do? Everybody in school is waiting for us to bring these guys down to the sweet shop. So let's wait another 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll just have to go break the news. You know, I'm kind of disappointed. You know, I met him at Franklin College, and, well, he's a Christian. At least he said he was. And I didn't think he'd stand this up. But I'm sorry. We'll wait a few minutes. Mary Jo, let's go to the sweet shop for the news. They didn't come. We got stood up.
door of Peggy's house. Okay, I gotta prop up a little here. Miss Ricketts? I'm Don Walsh. I had a date with Peggy tonight. Is she ready? Last night? No, tonight. I had a date tonight. I wasn't supposed to be here last night. Where is she? She had a date. I mean, where are they? Went to the ball game. Hey, I got 3 guys with me, and we're supposed to have 3 other dates. We'll just go over at the game. We'll see them over at the game, maybe. Well, she's got a date. I can't see her at the game? Well, I'll go at the game anyhow. So I'll see you later.
Meanwhile, at the ball game. Well, just 24 hours late.
Gosh, Peggy. Was I supposed to be here last night?
Yeah, I told you, do not come January 8th because I have a date.
I thought you said come January the 8th.
Well, I'm sorry, but I can't go because I promised this boy from Salem that I have a date with him tonight.
Where is he?
Well, he didn't show up. Now, I don't think he'll be here, but, you know, if he doesn't show up after the ball game, you check with me, and if he's not here, well, we'll go with you all, because the rest of the girls are available. But I really think he'll show up.
What is it? Something wrong with you girls?
He ad-libbed. Meanwhile, I'm not going to tell you all the rest of the story, because I don't want to tarnish my reputation. But the boy didn't show up after the ball game, but he did show up at the sweet shop, and there I was with Don. He was angry. I was frustrated. Don took me home about 10:30.
10:30?
Well, 11:30. And after he left and walked out of the door, I heard another knock on the door, and here was the boy from Salem who'd been standing in my hallway, waiting for him to leave so he could come in. So how do I explain to all my children that I had a double date the first night that I met their dad?
I'm not really privy to what took place when I left. I left there at 11:30, and he took over where I left off. That was on January the 8th. You know, I still talk to this guy. 3 years later, I gave her a ring, and that was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Storytelling. So, and we all like a good story. So I'm going to read the story. Once upon a time, long ago,
34 years, more or less.
and far away,
In Lexington, Kentucky, at the University of Kentucky campus.
2 young people
Yeah, we used to be young.
Met on the steps of the Baptist Student Union.
Met, she introduced herself to me.
Later, within the same week, the girl
Ruth Ann, the girl.
and her roommate
Joyce Fay.
chanced to meet that guy
That's me.
and his short roommate.
Short, what kind of roommate? Short, good-looking roommate.
That comes later in the story. Follow the script.
His name is Billy Ray. Did you ever notice that all Southerners have two names? Billy Ray, Bill Dave, Ruth Ann, Joyce Fay. Did you ever wonder why that is? I do too.
The guy so kindly walked the girl.
I walked with Joyce Fay, her roommate. Billy Ray walked with Ruth Ann. Now, Billy Ray is a handsome man. I didn't look better then than I do now.
Walked the girl back to the door after church, agreeing probably to see them again the next evening, that evening at church. Evening came, and the guys arrived at the training room. They got there first. Along then, a little bit later, came the two girls.
Two girls, Ruth Ann and Joyce Fay. Almost late as usual.
The short girl proceeded
Ruth Ann's the short girl.
to choose a seat next to the tall guy,
I'm the tall guy.
as it just happened to be the closest one. Joyce,
Being an enterprising young lady, sees the opportunity like most country girls do.
chose to circle the room and take a seat by the short guy,
That's Billy Ray. He's the good-looking one.
rather than to follow her roommate and not be seated next to one of the guys. The tall guy
That's still me.
leaned over to his roommate
That's Billy Ray.
and said,
Which? You see, we had made plans that we were going to actually go for a date for the coming weekend. So when they sit by the other ones, well, we just decided we'd just switch girls. We weren't hard to please.
So the guys walked the girls home from church and asked them for a date. But it was with opposite girls than originally planned.
Sounds like fate. Or sounds like fatal. I'm not sure.
So the tall guy
Oh, that's still me.
and the short girl
And that's still her.
had a date for a dance.
Our first date.
After a dance or two, the girl said, "Oh, you know what? I read there's to be a moon eclipse. I think it's tonight. Let's go out on the balcony and see if we can see it."
The ballroom at the university was on the second floor, and it had an outside balcony that looked out over the whole campus.
So the guy said, "Okay."
But the guy, okay, I lost my place. But thinking, boy, is she working fast. My dad told me when I left the mountains and went to the big city elections and to watch out for them pretty horses and fast women. Now I know what he's talking about.
The couple strolled out into the bright moonlight.
Sure is a bright, clear night. I don't see nothing eclipsing about the moon. What's this country girl got coming up in her mind?
Well, the girl thought, it must be later this evening that the eclipse is supposed to happen. And so she said as much and to the guy, and they returned to the ballroom. But this girl dearly loved things of nature and had a genuine curiosity.
Genuine curiosity? Maybe. or just a crafty girl of the world who would use any excuse to get a guy out on a moonlight balcony.
So she asked again later if they might go out on the balcony the second time.
Still full moon, no eclipse.
And a third time.
Can you believe this woman? Is this just an innocent young thing, dumb as a box of rocks, or does she know the ropes and is acting like a loose woman, inviting a guy out on the balcony time after time on the first day? What, is she real or what?
Such disappointment the girl felt. A perfectly clear moonlight night and a perfect place to see a moon eclipse, but where is it? She knew she had read of one, and she thought sure it was this night.
Disappointment? Probably disappointing because I didn't even try to kiss her.
The evening and the dance drew to a close, and the couple walked slowly back to the dorm, agreeing that it was a beautiful evening, but still no eclipse in view.
You know, I never did figure out what she really had in mind that night on all those trips to the balcony. Later, she said the moon eclipse the next night, but I never did see it. But anyway, I continued on for a year or two to chase her till she finally caught me. And we've been married happily now for 32 years.
We are going to tell you about the details that took place in the night of our engagement. It happened on October 21st, 1989, which was the sweetest day and which was the only reason I thought we were going out that evening, and it was also our 6-month anniversary. But there was more involved in that, as I found out later.
Earlier in the week, we'd been to Penny's shopping, and she picked out this dress and decided the one she has on tonight, and decided she didn't want to get it, and went on looking about other things. So I doubled back and told the counter girl to put it on reserve for me, and I'd be back in to get it later. Well, we'd been in looking at jewelry at T. Myers, and I'd been in behind her back and picked out a ring. It was supposed to be in pretty close to Christmas time, so I was planning on giving her this ring somewhere, well, it was going to be a Christmas present. It so happened it came in October the 20th, and Greg Reuter called me and told me it was in. So Saturday morning, October the 21st, I went in and picked it up. Went out to Penny's and picked up this dress that she knew nothing about. And then I came back through town and went back down to the Seymour National Bank to talk to her mother and ask her mother if it would be all right if I asked Alicia to marry. And I'm getting just as nervous right now as I was that night. To ask her mother if it was all right if I married her. And she said that that would be fine. So after I did that, I went down to 429 Persimmon Drive where she was at, and I needed to make sure that it was all right with her dad if I asked her to marry me, and he happened to be out on the front porch that morning working on the screen door, and I got a chance to talk to him before she even knew that I was there. So he said that would be all right, and I took the package in from Penny's and gave her the dress, which was the sweetest day present. She still didn't have any idea that she was going to be asked to be married. So we had plans to go to Columbus and go to Winans for dinner that night, which we promptly did. And on our way back, I was still trying to fumble around for an idea of where to go to ask her to marry me. So I came up with the idea of going up to One Chamber Square, and that's where we did it. It was a Saturday night about 10:30 at night with all the kids riding around, honking, and it went something like this. I gave her a card, which was a congratulations on an engagement, and this is the authentic card. And she pulled it out and read it. Saturday night, 10:30. I asked you, Alicia Ann, will you please be my wife?
I said, I'll think about it.
I gave her a ring box that was all wrapped up real nice and pretty, and handed it to her, and she fumbled around with it like this. So she gave it back to me, and I ended up opening it up. She still had no idea what this ring looked like. I told her to close her eyes, slipped it on her finger, and then she was able to open up her eyes and see that she was engaged. And that's how I win.
We always open it up if there's anybody else who would like to share their experience tonight with us. Not just the six that shared, but if any of you would like to just get up and share.
I don't think any of us can afford it.
Don't be shy. Anybody else would like to get up and share?
Can I share ours?
Good.
I had been in clinical to get my medicine through Banquet. And I went back to work, and they had half her there had a truck populated in the house with my mom. And after we got through, she said, go out and tell your supervisor that I need to be Ronnie Bernstein. I said, who? She said, Ronnie Bernstein. So I told her, the staff lady, that she wanted to see. Came back happy, and I didn't know who he was. And it was right after that, and he came back then, and I knew that he needed some help with what we was doing, like on the time cards and things like that. And so then we got more close to each other then. And so we was outside. They had picnic tables out there for a feed day. And so it was on I think it was a day that he had some experience in, and I said, yeah. And so we went together all summer of '87. And so we kept thinking about it, getting ready to on October 31st, that's my birthday. That didn't work out. It seemed like something much came up that we couldn't do it at that time. I said, let's just forget it, and I said, let's get it done. And so we've been married now 3 years, just past December. And it was Lord's work, and still has done it. Took me 41 years to get it.
Fall flat on her face with me. Anybody else? Well, we now find David May and a little after taking a sure down the title. Amen. Bring 'em on.
Here it is, another Valentine's Day. And we've been stuck in this stupid comic strip now for 42 years today. I've always wondered if my cartoons would have given me a real name, what my life would have been like. Like some sort of a, you know, an athlete type name or something. I don't know about you, but he don't look like an athlete, man. He looks more like a carpet man, and I could never be married to one of those. There's gotta be more. There's gotta be more. I know what I need. I need me a doctor, somebody to take care of me when I'm sick. If I was to think of anything, sorry about that. If I could have anything, I would want me a doctor type, a professor type, because I was educated and I need somebody smart too.
Well, there's one thing about it. You can't tell the difference between a doctor and a professor. What are you laughing about, Bobby? The professor doesn't think you're doing very good in seminary school either. Poor old Cloyd Cecil. Somebody said he looked like he was 90 years old today. He doesn't look like he's been over 100. You thought this was going to be easy, didn't you, Linda? The night's still young, believe me. Well, I think I'll leave now. No, wait a minute, I got one more here.
You coming back or is that nightmare over? Okay. Well, I don't know. I guess if I was to really pick my very favorite kind, it would be me a muscle man. Because he would protect me. Ain't nothing when you ain't got no face. I guess that cartoonist knew what he was doing when he put me and Little Abner together. I think that's what I need.
Yeah, well, that was the best thing that ever happened.
At this time, I'd like to call on Father Terry. He will introduce our guest to both of these tonight.
It's going to be kind of tough to top that, I tell you. I think Brian's already nervous. I need to apologize, first of all. I think everybody's handled it pretty well. We've been rushed coming back from Cincinnati. I know some of you saw us when we came in. We had just gotten to Seymour. And I did not realize until I walked in the door that I forgot to put my mustache on. I know most of you thought that I grew that. That was just something I put on, and I'm sorry I forgot to do that. But I would like to, the stories that were shared were so good. And since Luann's not here, if I could share just a little about the time when we met. Very quickly, what happened was I was on the football team and got kicked off of the football team because I was really the only one that would do what the coach wanted, and the rest of them didn't like me because of that. So I got kicked off the football team and ended up going into a study hall, and there she was. And so I began to talk with her and harass her pretty much, and she was a real quiet one and always was reading. And so I would ask her these crazy questions, which I will not embarrass myself by saying what they were, but I noticed that as I continued to talk with her, she never turned the pages in her book. And that was my first clue that I was getting somewhere. And so you might ask her about that when she's reading, and if you're talking to someone and they never turn the page, you've got their attention. So that was kind of how we met, and it just kind of went from there. So I will say as well, we're happy to be back, and I have been blessed with a wife as well. A great wife. I would also say that God has blessed me in other ways, and I want to introduce him to you tonight, and he's not aware of this also. But for me, when I came to seminary, it was a pretty traumatic move. A lot of things took place prior to me coming to seminary. You all were very much a part of that. I started seminary and came here within about a week's time of one another, and so leaving a job behind, leaving your family behind, and going to seminary and starting a new church position at about the same time could be very traumatic. But not only had that occurred, but the best friend that I guess I ever had recently graduated from seminary and had gone and accepted a position in St. Petersburg, Florida, which was kind of traumatic to me in that I guess it's time for me to go. Is that what this means? No. And Dwayne Martin must be behind here somewhere. And so I had a prayer on my heart when I came to seminary that God would lead me to a friend. And I had a lot of pastor friends that I had who said, Bob, seminary is a great place to meet friends, and just trust God will send you a friend. Well, it didn't happen like I thought. And I looked and looked. And just recently, Brian and I came in seminary at the same time. And what was ironic about that is probably he's not even aware of. When we met in chapel the very first day, Brian sat right in front of me. And here I sat looking for this friend and didn't know that the friend that the Lord was going to lead me was sitting right in front of me. And we began to have classes together. And this past week, when I was in Cincinnati, Brian's been taking care of me at school as far as keeping up with notes and so forth. So I want to introduce you tonight, Brian Cole. He's from Haiti, Missouri. He's in his second year at Southern Seminary. He pastors a church, also very ironic, that's not too far from where I grew up in Breckinridge County, Kentucky. And he also works with the seminary in recruitment. And some of you may have saw him on TV here just, last evening was it? He was on WHAS. If you watch the channels that come across the Ohio River from the Promised Land, you might have seen him. And so I introduced to you my good friend, Brian Cole.
To go to school at Murray State University in Western Kentucky. And Rebecca was playing third base, and I was playing right field. And have something in common. And she was a secretary at BSU. Someone mentioned BSU. And my father had been real involved in BSU, and his first recommendation was to go to the BSU. And I didn't know I was going to meet my wife there, but I did. And we've been married about 3 years now, I think. Thank you for prompting that, Bob. I think about 3 years. We're sure I get confirmation on that date. I'm not sure. About 3 years ago. So that is my story. And Becky is house sitting tonight. Seminary students do various odd jobs to make ends meet. And one of the things we do is we house sit. People go on vacation and we stay and play with all their stuff while they're gone. And we also get paid for it. So take our job very seriously. One of the first things I have to do tonight is to admit to you something. Admit to you that I'm an addict. And it is something that plagues millions of Americans. And it started when I was young, and instantly enough, and my brother got me involved in it, actually. It's the Andy Griffith Show. And I have to watch it about every day. I'm an addict. And he's worse than I am about it. He's a part of a club called the Andy Griffith Rerun Watchers Club. So it's a pretty serious time at 4:30 at our house. It's a kind of a pilgrimage, a shrine. We sit in front of the TV set and we're taken back about 30 years and what seems about 20,000 miles away to the Andy Griffith Show. And I wonder why I like this show so much. There's Andy and there's Barney and there's Aunt Bee and Opie and Goober, and Gomer. That's right. They are somewhat interchangeable, though. And I think what I really enjoy about the show, though, is the fact that it is the memories and good memories of a small town, kind of similar to what I grew up in, a very small town in rural Missouri, where everybody knew your name and everybody was safe to walk on the streets at night. And so I think of the good memories of that show and the good memories of growing up in a very small town in Missouri. And I think what made that show so popular for so many years and now even in syndication is because of the good memories it has and the good memories that you've shared tonight. But when I think of growing up, I have to admit we often share the good times. I don't think anyone tonight shared their marriage proposal that was turned down and they never married that person. We shared all the good times tonight. And growing up in Missouri, you dream of being a St. Louis Cardinal ball player someday. And I had that dream, and I practiced. And every year our Sunday school class would make a pilgrimage to Busch Stadium, and we would watch the Cardinals. And I spent many an hour listening on the radio to Jack Buck and Jay Randolph give the Cardinal games. And in the summer, in this little sleepy town called Hayti, all the attention would turn to the baseball fields. And one Thursday night, I'm on the mound pitching, which tells you what desperation my team was in that I was pitching. And facing me was a little boy named Sam Johnson. He was 11 years old and I was 11 years old. I was playing for the Bank of Hayti, and he was playing for the rival team, the Missouri Delta Bank, little town, little league. And I had walked the first two batters to face Sam. We were ahead by 2 runs in the last inning. And my coach came out to the mound and said, "Brian, just slow down and throw strikes." So he ran off, and with those words of encouragement, I threw the first pitch, which Sam then hit over the center field fence for a home run. And what seemed like 24 people rounded around the bases and scored, and we went on to defeat that night. And I think of that story, and I think of it especially a couple weeks ago, I watched the Super Bowl. And if some of you maybe watched that or taped it and watched it when you got home, you might have noticed one of the best played Super Bowls I'd ever seen, and it was decided on one kick, or the lack of one kick, by a man named Scott Norwood, who his job was to scoot the ball 47 yards. If he would have done so successfully, the Buffalo Bills would have won by 2 points. But because of his tendency to go off to the right, he hooked it, the New York Giants won. And so Scott Norwood becomes a GOAT and not a hero. And I think of growing up in church, and I think of being a Christian. And we have a tendency to remember the Samuel Johnsons who hit the home runs, or the Jeff Hostettlers who lead the teams into victory, and the Scott Norwoods and the Brian Coles who give up the game-winning home runs. Those people seem to be forgotten. We go to Christian bookstores, and you see all these books about how people have overcome disease, or they've overcome tragedy, or they've overcome maybe an illness as a young child or an abusive home, and they've triumphed, and now we celebrate their story. And Johnny Carson always has the winners on his talk show. You'll never see Scott Norwood come and talk about what it felt like to kick the ball to the right. You know, he always wants to talk to the winners. And so I've noticed that growing up. And that worked for me growing up very much. Because I had very much what I call a Leave It to Beaver experience growing up. I had 3 older brothers, and we all had short hair, and all our clothes matched, and Mom and Dad went to work, and Dad taught at the high school, and we were at church, and we were at the ball field, and we said yes ma'am and no ma'am, and yes sir and no sir, and we did our homework, and it was too easy growing up at times. And my father and I were very close. I was the youngest. I'll say I was his favorite, but I can say that. And we would ride bikes together, and my father was an English teacher, so I was part athlete, but I was mostly student. He and I would play Scrabble together. That sounds like a real exciting thing to do with your dad, I'm sure, but we'd spend hours playing Scrabble and crossword puzzles. And life was just really easy and real good. And we never seemed to drop the ball, you know. Field goals always went through, and life was good, and bills were paid, and Mom and Dad kissed every morning before they left. And so I go off to college, supposedly to be an accounting major, and Mom and Dad kissed me on the forehead, or actually kissed me on the chin. Couldn't quite reach the forehead. And I go out the door into the big bad world of Murray, Kentucky to be a student, where I then meet Rebecca, and the fairy tale continues. And we could continue to write the book about how we were just the typical all-American family. Becky and I married our last year in college, and we live on love, as someone else has mentioned. And I get a phone call one day from my father, which was not anything abnormal. He called often and said that he was going to go into the hospital for some tests, that he had experienced some tightness in the stomach, and he wasn't sure what was there, but not to be concerned. So, being a son, I was concerned. Drove to Memphis, Tennessee, where the surgery was to take place, and found out that Dad had a malignant tumor in his belly. First time in my life I realized that parents die someday. You know, as a child, things change, but Mom and Dad always seem to be there. So, just for the first time in my life, I was faced with mortality and the fact that someday I guess I would die. When you're 20 years old, you don't believe that. But at that time, I was faced with the possibility of his death. So, growing up in a Christian home and in a Christian church, I began to pray. And friends began to pray, and churches began to pray, and Mom and Dad prayed. And because in my mind, I think I had this understanding of prayer that there's a prayer meter somewhere. And if we pray hard enough and long enough, and if there are enough prayers, and if they're said just right, that somewhere a prayer meter goes off, and the requested answer is given. And that worked for a while. Dad got better. Treatments were given. He was recovering. He was also losing weight and all the effects that you have when you're a cancer patient. But he got better, and by the spring, he had fully recovered. So my theology was intact. When something bad happens, you pray, and it gets fixed. So we enter seminary, and I meet individuals like Bob Sherry, and I meet other good folks as well. And Becky and I begin to adjust. She finds a job, and I find a job, and school is great, and we're having a good time. And Dad's getting better, and we're celebrating that. Dad returns to teaching, and about a month into the seminary year, Dad has a seizure in class and collapses. and I get a phone call, and the cancer had moved to his brain, and Dad is going to get worse. So once again, I'm faced with this understanding that parents are going to die someday. But once again, I also begin to pray. And Becky's family, and now a new seminary community that I now have, these people are praying. And I'm thinking, somehow, some way, he's not going to die, because he's my father. He wouldn't let me down, right? So Dad gets slowly worse. And I visited him over Christmas of, I guess it would have been 89, Christmas of 89. And we talked, and Dad wanted to continue to teach. But he really was no longer able to tell how weak he was getting. It would take him forever to just do basic things. So I was there. It was my task to convince him that he needed to retire, which is one of the hard things when a son becomes the father and the father becomes the son, if you've ever experienced that. And as we talked, and he talked about, but all I want to do is teach. All I want to do is teach. And I wanted him so bad to do that. But that was no longer going to be the case. So I go back to Louisville, and I started J-term, and I get a phone call that Dad had gone to the hospital and slipped into a coma. And I knew that this was the time to check out of school for a little while, to drop the J-term and go home. And if I can explain to you what Haytime, Missouri is like, if you've never been there, it is a very small town on the Mississippi River where cotton used to be king, but cotton went south, and now you have many displaced workers. It's mostly a black community where my father had been a role model to many people, both black and white, as a high school teacher. He had taught during segregation. He had taught during integration. He had affected many people in that school. So as I go home to many memories, and I went home to many friends. And I get there, and I walk into the hospital where I was born. And I think to myself, what am I doing here? I'm walking into the hospital where I was born, where all my brothers were born. And I realized that my father walked down this hall at one time of his life, planning my life. If you ever can think about that, growing up in the same small town in Missouri, he walked down those same halls, planning the lives of Keith and Craig and Gary and Brian. And now Keith and Craig and Gary and Brian walk down those same halls every day waiting for Dad to die. And Dad got worse and worse, and we knew it was going to happen. It was a matter of waiting. People continued to pray. And one afternoon a family came in who had been students of my father and asked if they could pray with me. Now I'm a seminary student, and seminary students know everything, right? And I think to myself, why do you want to pray? I didn't say this. But I said, sure, we can pray. And they prayed, and they asked that Dad would be restored to his health. And they asked that Dad would somehow recover from this and bounce back. And I began to realize something. Those people had read all the books I told you about a while ago, where the football always goes through the middle, where Brian never gives up the home run, and where we always recover and we always bounce back. And they had forgotten that sometimes you drop the ball, and sometimes you go wide to the right. So they said amen and left, and I stood there with Dad and just shook my head, as seminary students do a lot, and realized I didn't know everything, but I realized that they had much to learn as well. So go back to seminary, have to start classes. Brothers and I are on a rotation basis, sitting with Mom. And I get the call on Monday night that Dad had died. And I'm able to go home that week because, for those of you who have ever dealt with cancer, you grieve from the very beginning that you hear the news. And I had grieved for a year and a half. And I began to think to myself as I'm driving that road that I had driven so many times before, I wonder what those people are thinking who had prayed for Dad just a couple weeks before. Were they thinking that it was my fault that we hadn't prayed hard enough? Or that enough people hadn't prayed? Or somehow our prayers had not been structured properly? Or we had been too vague in our askings? Or is it that we serve a God and we have a Savior who suffered, and that we live in a world where people are hurting, and where there is pain, and there is sickness? And as much as we Christians like to deny it, sometimes we drop the ball. And sometimes we have to say goodbye to people that we love. Because you see, the cross is a defeat in many ways. The disciples, I'm sure, must have been very disappointed in Jesus. I mean, Jesus, get real. This is not what we had hoped for you. We had planned a much bigger engagement than this. There's nobody out here, Jesus. You're being led to this cross, and you're not getting it. You're dropping the ball, okay? Or think about Mary, and think about all the plans we have for our children. And one of them is not, well, I hope someday they'll be crucified. And she must have been so disappointed in her son to think he would have ended up there. But yet now you and I talk about finding strength in the cross now. Now why do we find any strength in the cross? Maybe it's because we see in the cross a Savior and a servant who suffered and who, maybe you would say, dropped the ball, who was momentarily defeated. Because you see, I think if Jesus would have never died on the cross, I would have a hard time measuring up. Because I dropped the ball a lot. I missed a lot of free throws growing up. But because of what Jesus did, you and I have an opportunity to respond to that and realize that Jesus dropped the ball. He suffered all that we suffered, as it talks about in Hebrews. So as we stroll down memory lane tonight, you're going to remember the good things, and you should. You should. And these are the memories that we shared tonight, and rightly so. Because the memories that are bad are too close to our hearts sometimes. And we have to keep those hidden. But we serve a God who allows us to share those times with Him. And I can understand why it's much better to share the good things. They are important. But it is some of those bad things that might be closer to our hearts tonight. I'd like to thank you for letting me share my story tonight, because a part of grief is healing, and every time I get to share my story, I'm healed. I'd like to thank Bob for letting me come and talk to you. And I'd like to thank Bob for being my friend through what has been a real troubling time at times. I think there's going to be a time for a prayer again. But memories are important, are very important to me. And I have a lot of good memories. Sometimes I struck the person out. Overall, I was about a 500% pitcher, so it's about even. But thank you for letting me come tonight.
Hope you all had a good time tonight. And if you did, I want to introduce the young lady who's responsible for this, and I think we ought to give her a big hand. Linda Method. right here. She was going to introduce her. We met there. While she's coming, after she's done, I've asked Bob around if he will dismiss us with prayer, and I think Bob wants you to get around in a circle for a prayer circle. Okay?
This year I made me a list, so hopefully I don't leave anybody out. First of all, I want to thank Miss Barry. She came out of retirement to put this on. And I'm sure y'all would love to have a nice evening of entertainment, but without good food, you know, it'll be half there. So if you see Miss Barry before we leave, please tell her thank you and appreciate it, because I know y'all do. Secondly, I have a card I wanted all the time so we could send to Jean Silver, because she would have been here, you know, she could have been, I know. So I'm going to send her a get well card. I want to thank some people. If I leave anybody out, I'm so sorry. I had a super decorations committee, as you can see. Claire Ulmer, Janet Brown, and Rhonda Kidwell. Without them, this wouldn't have been done. Joe Allen got me a babysitter, so those of you that need babysitters, it's nice not to have to worry about the little ones. Gay Lee took care of my tickets. She was super. Bobby Cherry got us an excellent devotionalist. And I want us to notice a little love prayer here. I'm not going to say who did it because they don't want to be known. But take this home, read it if you have time. It's beautiful. I want to thank the entertainment people. I gave them a little idea. Daisy, May, and 11. Boy, didn't they do a super job on it. Same way with our people that did our little memories. I asked them to do something, and they did it. Now we have a tough thing. I need everybody's help. If we could have these people stand as I name them, and we're going to give them a little prize, we're only going to have one couple, folks. So by your applause, we are going to find the best memory down memory lane. So, Tim and Sally, get pressed. Stand up. Yeah. Bill and Katie, stand up, please. Don and Teddy Ball. Bill and your statement. And Greg and Alicia Reedy. Let's have a run-off between Greg and Alicia. You can only go for one couple this time. It's going to be between Greg and Alicia and Bill and Ruth. So, Greg and Alicia. Greg and Alicia, come up here. Thank you for doing it. And one last thing, did everybody get their tickets? I know I told Leslie to. How many people brought their tickets? Raise your hand. How many people remember their number? Okay, so the person that has ticket number 12, anybody here have ticket number 12? Number 12. Bobby, you didn't even buy a ticket. Anybody